Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. Tonight's story is fiction. Names, places, and events are entirely made up for entertainment. This story includes themes of betrayal, deception, and attempted violence. Please listen with care. Now, let your room go quiet.
Let your shoulders drop, and if it helps, take one slow breath in and let it out, gently. They say you can feel when something changes in your home. More like the air moving differently around familiar furniture. Not like a shout, not like a slammed door. Mara felt it on a Tuesday, not because Ethan did something obvious, but because he didn't. He didn't linger when he came through the door. He didn't leave his phone on the counter like he used to. He didn't ask about her day with the lazy comfort of someone who belongs to you. Instead, he moved through the house as if it were a hallway. Temporary and transitional. Mara had always been good at noticing small things. The way a kettle sounds before it whistles. The way a dog's ears lift before it barks. The way people's voices tighten when they're holding something back. And Ethan, her husband of 7 years, had been holding something back for weeks. Their home sat on a quiet street where every porch light worked, where neighbors waved like they meant it. The kind of street where nothing truly bad feels like it can happen, until it does. Mara was the kind of person who kept extra tea in the pantry for guests. The kind of person who remembered birthdays, who folded towels into neat stacks, who checked the locks twice at night because it made her feel responsible, not afraid. Ethan was charming in the practiced way, effortlessly social, good at smiling, good at being liked, the kind of man people described as solid, the kind of man you'd trust with your spare key. But lately his routines had begun to fray. He stopped leaving his phone face up. He started taking work calls outside. He began going on late-night drives that returned him home with the faint, lingering scent of someone else's perfume clinging to his jacket like a secret. Mara didn't accuse. Not yet. Mara watched. Because Mara had learned something about lies. They have habits. And the truth has patterns. On that Tuesday, she was folding laundry when she heard the subtle buzz of Ethan's phone. Not a call, just a message. The phone sat on the kitchen island, screen down. Mara told herself she was only going to move it away from the edge. Just a small nudge so it wouldn't fall. But the screen lit when it shifted, bright and sudden, like a flashlight switching on in a dark room. A preview of a text appeared. It was short. Casual in the way that intimacy can sound when it doesn't need to explain itself. Did you book the tickets? I can't wait to finally be free. The contact name wasn't a co-worker. It wasn't a friend. It was a single letter. L.A. Mara stood still long enough to hear her heartbeat become a sound in the room. Then the screen went dark again, as if the phone had blinked and decided to keep it secret. And Mara did what many people do when their world begins to crack. She finished folding the laundry, sock by sock, towel by towel, as if neat stacks could hold her life together. That night, Ethan showered longer than usual. Steam fogged the mirror, blurring his reflection until it didn't look like him. It made him seem like a stranger in her own bathroom. Mara sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Her fingers were steady. Her mind was sharp. Too sharp, like it had slipped into a survival mode she didn't ask for. She checked their joint accounts. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones. A luggage store, a passport photo service, a wire transfer to a bank she didn't recognize. It wasn't just cheating, it was planning. And planning meant time, effort, a future that didn't include her. Mara clicked through their shared email folders, travel, bills, receipts. Nothing obvious at first. But then she noticed something strange. A calendar event that had briefly synced to the shared family calendar before disappearing again, like a mistake someone corrected too late. Review. Exit plan. Mara stared at those words until they stopped looking like language and started looking like a warning. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurt, but because crying would come later, when she was safe enough to fall apart. Right now, she needed to stay assembled. She listened as Ethan padded into the bedroom, toweling his hair, humming like nothing had happened. He kissed her cheek in passing with a quick, absent-minded affection. Then he rolled onto his side and fell asleep. Or pretended to. Mara lay beside him and watched the shape of his breathing. And she realized something that made the room feel colder than the winter air outside. Ethan was no longer afraid of losing her. He was afraid of her being in the way. Over the next few days, Mara learned the difference between suspicion and certainty. Suspicion is a question. Certainty is a weight. Ethan started wearing cologne on days he never used to. He started doing laundry more often, as if he wanted to erase evidence before she could see it. He started smiling at his phone in a way that didn't include her. Mara listened calmly to his little excuses. Traffic was insane. Work ran late. My phone died. He said these things in the same voice he used to tell her he loved her. And that was the worst part. Mara didn't confront him. Instead, she gathered breadcrumbs. A quick photo of the bank transfer details when she could. A screenshot of the text preview when his phone lit again on the counter one morning. A photo of his passport when it sat unattended on his desk as if it were already half gone. Then she forwarded everything to a private email address Ethan didn't know existed. Not paranoia, insurance. On Thursday night, Ethan came home with an energy that felt too bright, too fast, like he was trying to outrun something inside himself. He kissed Mara's forehead like affection was a shield. Then, in the kitchen, he leaned against the counter and smiled. He suggested they do something nice for the weekend. A getaway. Just the two of them. A cabin by the lake. Quiet. No distractions. The word cabin landed in Mara's mind like a stone. A place away from witnesses. Away from cameras. Away from neighbors who waved like they meant it. Mara picked up her tea mug and took a slow sip, so her hands wouldn't betray what her face refused to show. She told him it sounded lovely. Ethan's shoulders loosened. He looked relieved, the way people do when they think a plan is going smoothly. What he didn't realize was that Mara had just agreed to go somewhere, so she could come back alive. That night, Mara called her friend Nina and left a voicemail that sounded casual, almost cheerful. If I don't answer this weekend, it's because we're heading to a cabin by Lake Caro. I'll text you when we get there. Then she texted the same information to her sister. Then she wrote it down on a sticky note and placed it under the fruit bowl, visible enough that someone might notice if they were looking. Breadcrumbs. Not dramatic, just permanent. The next day, Mara went for a walk and bought a prepaid phone with cash. She bought a portable charger, a small flashlight, a loud keychain alarm. She packed a second bag, not clothes, tools. She kept her voice calm around Ethan, kept her eyes soft, kept her movements normal. Because she understood something else about people who plan to erase you. They don't like surprises. Saturday arrived, wrapped in pale winter light. Ethan loaded the car with the easy confidence of a man who thought he controlled the story. Mara slid into the passenger seat and clicked her seatbelt into place with a sound that felt oddly final. The drive to Lake Caro was quiet. Ethan hummed along to the radio. He made small talk. He asked if Mara wanted to stop for coffee. He asked if she wanted the music louder. Questions that sounded like care, but felt like a performance. Mara watched the trees blur past the window and thought about how quickly a life could become a headline. A person reduced to a sentence. She didn't want to be a sentence. She wanted to remain a whole story. The cabin appeared after a long stretch of road that seemed to forget civilization existed. It was tucked behind pines, small and neat, as if it wanted to be invisible. Inside, everything smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. Ethan carried the bags in and moved confidently, as if he'd been here before, like he knew which floorboards creaked. Mara noticed something small right away. The smoke detector in the hallway had been removed, not ripped out, unscrewed carefully and set on a shelf, a detail that didn't belong to a normal weekend. Mara's stomach tightened, but her voice stayed gentle. She asked why it was down. Ethan didn't look up. He said it kept chirping. He'd fix it later. Later. Mara nodded as if she believed him, and inside her mind she repeated the word like a warning. Later, later, later. That evening, Ethan cooked dinner, pasta, wine, candles. It was almost sweet if you didn't know the sweetness was a costume. They ate. They talked about nothing. Ethan laughed too loudly. He refilled Mara's glass too often. Mara took tiny sips and let most of the wine stay in the glass. Because Mara knew the oldest trick: make someone sleepy, make them weak, make them easier. Outside, the lake was a black sheet under the moon. Ethan suggested they sit by the fireplace. Mara sat. Ethan watched her like he was timing something. Then he stood and said he'd get more wood from the shed. He told her to stay warm. He stepped outside and shut the cabin door behind him. Mara waited. 3 seconds. 5. Then she moved. She grabbed her flashlight, slipped on her coat, and followed. The air outside was sharp enough to sting. Frost glittered on the porch steps. Mara walked quietly toward the shed. The shed door was slightly open. Mara peered in. And there, hanging beside a coil of rope and a toolbox, was a plastic container labeled Pool Chemicals. Mara didn't own a pool. The cabin didn't have one either. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. The smell alone was harsh, wrong for a place that was supposed to be peaceful. Then she heard Ethan's voice behind her, too calm. He asked if she was lost. Mara turned slowly, flashlight still in her hand. She said she was looking for him. Ethan smiled, but it wasn't the smile from the wedding photos. It was thinner, colder. He told her to come back inside. It was freezing. Mara followed him because, in that moment, she didn't have a choice yet. But now she knew something with a clarity that settled deep in her bones.
This cabin wasn't a getaway.
It was a stage, and Ethan was ready to perform. Back inside, Ethan locked the door. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft click. Mara felt that sound in her ribs. Ethan poured himself a drink. Then he offered Mara another glass. A last toast, he said, to us. Mara lifted the glass. She repeated the words. She touched her lips to it. Barely. Ethan watched, satisfied. Then he moved to the kitchen counter where a cutting board sat beside a knife. He picked up the knife like it was part of cooking, like it was normal. He said, quietly, that he didn't want it to be this way. Mara set her glass down slowly. She asked, in the gentlest voice she could manage, why it was. Ethan exhaled like he'd rehearsed the lines. Because you won't let go. Because you'll fight. Because you'll take half. Because you'll ruin everything. Mara's heart tried to climb into her throat, but her voice stayed calm. She said the truth out loud. You have someone else. Ethan's eyes flickered, annoyed that she'd named it. He said it didn't matter. And in the quiet that followed, Mara understood something terrifying. He wasn't speaking like a man caught in a mistake. He was speaking like a man justifying a decision. Mara reached into her pocket and turned on the prepaid phone. A small beep. Ethan's expression changed. Mara held the phone up just enough for him to see. She told him she'd called someone. Ethan stepped forward. He said she hadn't. Mara didn't argue. She didn't need to, because the phone wasn't only a threat. It was bait. Ethan lunged, fast and angry, reaching for the phone. Mara moved sideways, letting him overstep, and when he grabbed for her, she shoved him, just enough. Ethan stumbled into the coffee table. The knife clattered onto the rug. Mara snatched up the fireplace poker. Not to attack, to keep distance. She told him to stop. Ethan's face twisted with a kind of anger that looked almost childish, like the anger of someone whose toy had been taken away. He asked if she thought she could ruin this for him. He reached again. Mara backed toward the door, eyes on his hands, breathing slow, refusing to panic. And then, headlights swept across the cabin windows. A car. Ethan froze. Relief hit Mara's chest so hard it almost hurt. Because Nina had done what Mara prayed she would do. She came. Mara flung the door open and stepped onto the porch. She heard Nina's car door slam. She heard Nina call her name. And behind Mara, Ethan's mask snapped back into place. Wide-eyed, palms open, voice soft as silk. He said he was glad Nina was there. He said Mara had been acting strange. He said he thought she was having some kind of episode. Mara didn't look at him. She looked at Nina, and she spoke clearly, carefully, like every word mattered. Call the police. Now. Nina didn't hesitate. Ethan took a step backward into the cabin. Then another. His eyes darted, calculating. And then he turned and bolted toward the side door, vanishing into the trees. In that moment, Mara understood something important. Ethan had never planned a conversation. He'd planned an ending. But now, the ending had witnesses. And this is where we'll pause part 1. With Mara on the porch, Nina on the phone, and the dark woods swallowing Ethan's footsteps. Take a slow breath. Let your jaw unclench. And when you're ready, we'll continue.